All right, here we are at the fifth and final lesson in this series, and the final step in the process that I use working with my clients. And name of this step or this part of the process is change your self-concept. So we've got up there again our drinking equation that we're used to. Discomfort drives drinking. The premise there is that when you find yourself drinking against your will, or when some part of you doesn't want to drink, thinks you shouldn't drink, but you drink anyway, the reason is because there is some discomfort there that you're not able or willing to handle, and the drinking changes it. The drinking solves that discomfort. And so most of this work, most of the things we've talked about are focused on dealing with that discomfort. So I want to review the 4 steps real quickly. So the first was observe and understand the discomfort. And in that lesson I talked about how you can pay attention to yourself, what to look out for, and kind of when to focus your attention so that you start to understand what's going on in your life and in your drinking. What are your triggers? What are the feelings that you experience? What's going on the left side of that equation that's driving the action of drinking? The second lesson, step 2, was talking about setting good constraints. And that was basically just some practical information about how to set constraints in a way that's going to be a lot more effective than probably the things that you've done. And secondly, is going to provide a situation so that when you don't meet your constraints, because you won't always, that you can learn from that you can get further understanding of your discomfort, and have that as the basis to create strategies to do better the next time. Lesson 3 was talking about managing the discomfort. You don't want to have to be in the business forever of constraining yourself and having to live with that discomfort. So what I talked about there is how to approach that discomfort and be with it, basically embrace it in a way that makes it be a lot less powerful, a lot less troublesome, a lot less of a bother. Lesson 4 talked about eliminating the discomfort, which is about understanding the linkage between your thoughts and your feelings, and some ways to change your thinking or change your perspectives, change where you focus your attention, so that you basically change your emotional experience, so that you've got fundamentally less discomfort to manage and less discomfort to deal with. So brings us to step 5, change your self-concept. And you can see that the first 4 steps I've put under the heading of doing. These are all things that you do. And step 5 is really about being a certain person, being a different person. And the point here is we want to use step 5 to kind of lock in the behavioral changes that you create in step 4, because you don't want to spend the rest of your life setting constraints around alcohol, managing discomfort, and eliminating discomfort so you can control your drinking. You've got bigger and better things to do. And you may be using these tools to make more money, to improve your relationships, to do a hobby, to anything but control your drinking. And self-concept is where we're going to lock in all that stuff. So what is self-concept? Your self-concept is really nothing but a bunch of thoughts about yourself, and typically they're repeated and they're habitual and they're sort of situation independent. They're running in the background, or at least they're available to think easily because you've practiced thinking them before, kind of separate from any specific situation that you're involved in. But like all thoughts, they create emotions, they contribute to your emotional state, and they affect how you think and act in a situation. They create a bias or filter that affects how you process and interpret incoming information. And so, confirmation bias is basically we find evidence to support what we already believe. And if our beliefs create uncomfortable emotion, then we're going to see more things in the world that create negative emotion. And the same goes for positive emotion. Your self-concept thoughts can give you confidence or take away confidence. And they can act as constraints or as permission for various types of behavior. So here's a listing of some random examples of self-concept thoughts. I'm an American, I'm a Southerner, I'm an O'Neill. And for some people, those kinds of identity thoughts can be really meaningful and affect how they feel about themselves and how they act. Here's one: I don't do heroin or smoke cigarettes. So typically, self-concept thoughts are I am thoughts, or I do or I don't do thoughts. So a thought like I don't do heroin is a powerful thought. You won't even be tempted by heroin. You could hear all sorts of stories about how awesome it is, how much fun it is, and as long as that's kind of in your self-concept, that you're not somebody that does that, you're not going to have to spend a lot of time setting constraints around heroin. I'm nice to animals and restaurant servers. Here's one a thought that I used to identify myself for a long time is I'm not really a creative or an artistic person, but I'm a good problem solver. Well, that thought turned out not to be very true. Now I see myself as quite creative. And I don't think that fundamentally the basic me is more creative. I've just chose not to believe that thought. I'm good at sports as a self-concept thought. Things usually work out for me. That's a filter on the world that will really affect your experience versus things always go wrong for me. So here are some specific unhelpful self-concept thoughts related to drinking that have come up from the discussions I've had with over 100 people on this subject. So a couple about family. I'm from a family where drinking is important for connection. If that really is a defining characteristic, my family drinks and that matters, it's going to not lend itself to you changing your relationship to alcohol, to you making alcohol unimportant in your life. And this other one's even more common. I'm from a family of alcoholics who abuse alcohol. That's definitely a kind of belief that kind of becomes self-perpetuating. But you might say, but it's true. Okay, maybe it's part of the truth of your family, but is it important? Is it relevant? Scientifically, I would say not. Is it the only way to define your family? Probably not. And so, if nothing else, you can not give attention to that thought and let it create your identity, because it's not going to be helpful. I don't have much willpower. I can't stop when I start. I start strong, but then I give up. I'm an all or nothing kind of person. These all seem sort of like you're just telling the news about yourself, but they're not necessarily true. They're certainly not completely true, but they're going to create a certain feeling. They're going to affect your confidence. They're going to interact with situations around alcohol that aren't going to help you be the moderate drinker that you want to be. I'm the life of the party. I've had a few people for whom this was a big deal, and they felt like their friends expected them to be a certain way, and if they didn't show up in that way, and that they could only show up in that way with drinking, that there was a problem. I'm a drinker. It's just a simple statement, but it can be pretty powerful. I'm a creature of habit. Another guy was really big on how adaptable he was and how flexible and spontaneous. And those could be great qualities. But they also really got in the way of him setting constraints on himself and following those constraints, because he was always adjusting in the moment. And while that was maybe a good skill with certain aspects of his business, it was not a good skill with respect to his drinking, because in the moment he wanted to drink. I'm a black and white thinker. I don't like rules. So, what we do in coaching and what you can do for yourself is pay attention to the thoughts that come up as you're thinking about drinking and as you're making drinking decisions. Or when you're thinking about yourself, and make a mental note or write some of these thoughts down and have a look. Is this going to help me in my drinking journey or not? I want to give you a couple ideas of thoughts, self-concept thoughts around drinking that could be useful. So my family doesn't define me. Those would be in relation to those unhelpful family thoughts above. I'm a professional. This is a really powerful identity for some people and really affects many aspects of their behavior. So if this matters to you, and maybe being a professional involves being at your best just reminding yourself that you're a professional could affect some of the decisions you make in certain drinking situations. I do what I say. Here's a way to step into, to take on one of these thoughts slowly, and that's I'm learning to keep my word to myself. You may not believe it if you say I keep my word to myself, but it's true that if you're doing this process I've talked about, or if you're working with me, that you're learning to keep your word to yourself. Some others, I keep the big picture in mind all the time. Typically, drinking is about making decisions about the next hour at the expense of the next day and the next month. And if you start to think of yourself as somebody who keeps the big picture in mind, you're going to empower yourself. I'm good at facing discomfort. This is a great one for athletes, because if you do any kind of sports or physical training, you put yourself in the way of discomfort. You create discomfort for yourself. And you can see that what drives you to drink is also discomfort. And if you see yourself as a person who's good at discomfort, that's going to empower you with respect to your drinking. I'm learning how to love myself. I haven't talked about it in this course so much, but one of the main themes in my coaching with people is that beating yourself up, tearing yourself down is absolutely unhelpful. If it helped, you would already not drink, because I know, or you wouldn't drink too much, because most people that I've talked with that are in a situation, as I presume you, the viewer to be, are pretty hard on themselves. This next one would be for the life of the party. People like me for me, not because I entertain them. Alcohol isn't important to me. I have a take it or leave it attitude towards alcohol. It may not be always true, but it's probably sometimes true. It's probably true of you at 9 o'clock in the morning. You may not be take it or leave it guy at 6, but it's true at 9. If you could practice thinking that, it'll become more sort of self-evident to you that that's who you are. I'm thoughtful about my drinking. I don't need alcohol to manage my emotions. I make my own choices around drinking. I don't let others decide for me. This would be a good one if you're somebody that looks to people outside you for permission to drink. I asked my wife if it would be okay, and she said yes. Or if you find yourself being rebellious because of what you perceive as external control. This idea that I make my own choices could maybe free you up from some of that dynamic. My drinking is in my control. I'm becoming a fit and healthy person. So there you go. This is not about really mantras or affirmations. The idea is to identify your thoughts, choose to sort of detach from them a little bit, notice when they come up, and maybe pick a couple of these or make up your own self-concept thoughts that are empowering, that are going to be relevant and accurate for the person that you want to be and that you're becoming. So that's it for the training. I hope it's been helpful. I want to really suggest that you apply yourself to it, that it works. And I want to offer that the way to really make this stuff work is to get my help. And I offer a free call where you can find out what that help looks like, logistics of the program, what it costs, and even if you don't choose to make the decision to hire me, you're going to learn more about these steps and how they apply to your situation from our discussion than, you're going to learn a lot, I should say it that way. Everybody that goes through this call is glad they did. They find it encouraging and inspiring, and maybe it'll lead to the decision to hire me, which will absolutely put you on the guaranteed and fast track to solving this problem. So there's a link below this to sign up for that call, to schedule it, and I'd love to talk with you. All right, thanks.